The first strike. The sky was peaceful, like any other day on Earth. But no one knew that this calm was about to be shattered. Out of nowhere, massive alien ships appeared in the atmosphere. They weren't like anything Earth scientists had ever imagined. Their size was beyond comprehension, each one larger than a city, brimming with power, and they came without warning. At first, people thought it was a mistake, a strange weather pattern, or a military test. But then the explosions began. The first hit was on the East Coast. A city that had stood for centuries was vaporized in an instant. No one knew what had happened, but the sky filled with smoke and debris. Thousands, even millions of lives were lost in that single moment. The news reports were frantic. Everyone was trying to make sense of it. Was it a natural disaster? Was it an act of war? But the truth was worse than anyone could imagine. Earth had just been invaded, and not by any force of nature, but by an alien species with technology far superior to anything humanity had ever seen. The invaders didn't stop there. They began systematically attacking Earth's major cities. New York, London, Tokyo, and Paris. All were hit one after another. Each blast from the alien ships seemed to come from nowhere, striking with terrifying precision. The world's military forces scrambled to respond, but they were outmatched at every turn. Fighter jets were torn apart in seconds, and missile defense systems were useless against the alien technology. Panic spread like wildfire. People who had once believed that Earth was safe from the horrors of space now found themselves caught in the middle of an unimaginable war. The attacks came faster than the human response. Governments struggled to organize, but chaos soon gripped the streets. Families fled their homes. Cities fell silent. Earth had no defense against this unstoppable force. In the midst of the panic, humanity's leaders gathered to make decisions, but their options were limited. Some called for a counterattack, hoping to strike back before it was too late. Others, terrified of what they had witnessed, proposed surrender. How could they fight a war they were so clearly losing? The President of the United States, standing before a room full of advisors, had just one thing on his mind: survival. "We need to do something. Anything," he shouted, his voice shaking with fear. "We can't just sit here and let them wipe us out." But the truth was even more frightening. The alien ships hovered above cities, their weapons devastating everything in their path. They didn't land or communicate. It was as though they were simply marking Earth for destruction, as if the planet itself had been sentenced to die. While Earth's leaders debated their next move, civilians were left to fend for themselves. Some tried to leave the cities, while others scrambled to find shelter underground. But no one was safe. The attacks kept coming, and it seemed as though no place on Earth could escape the wrath of the alien fleet. News broadcasts only made things worse. Every new report confirmed what the people had feared. Earth was under attack. Major cities were gone. Thousands were dead. People started losing hope. What could they possibly do against such an advanced enemy? Back at the White House, the president made a decision. We need to fight back, no matter the cost. We are not giving up. But how? The technology they were facing was far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. Earth's best fighter jets, advanced missiles, and defense systems were no match. Nothing seemed to stop the aliens. Every attempt to fight back ended in failure. Then came the strange twist. The invaders weren't just destroying cities. They were systematically targeting Earth's scientific research centers, hospitals, and places where medical advancements were being made. It was clear that the aliens were not just after Earth's resources. They were targeting humanity's ability to heal and grow. The invaders had a purpose, but it was still unclear what that purpose was. Were they just trying to destroy the planet, or did they want something more? The world's best minds, scientists, military experts, and strategists, began to gather in secret, desperate to find a way to fight back. But as the alien ships continued their destruction, it seemed like there was no hope. As the alien assault carried on, The remaining survivors began to realize that they were facing something unlike any war they had ever imagined. These invaders weren't just conquerors, they were predators. And Earth, with all its natural beauty and human ingenuity, was now the prey. Earth's leaders issued one final message to the rest of the world. We will fight back. We will survive. But the question remained, how? Could humanity really stand a chance against such an overwhelming force? The world was on the brink of collapse, but there was still a flicker of hope in the hearts of the survivors. The battle was far from over. The aliens may have thought they could easily conquer Earth, but they had no idea what they were about to face. The time for Earth to strike back was coming, but would it be too late? As the alien ships continued to wreak havoc, the human race had one final chance to prepare for what would come next. A war had begun, and Earth's survival depended on finding a way to stop the invaders before it was too late. The world was still reeling from the attacks. Cities that had once been symbols of human achievement now lay in ruins. The death toll was in the millions, and the planet was on the verge of collapse. But amid the chaos, something began to stir, a spark of defiance. In the aftermath of the alien assault, the survivors found themselves with little to no resources, their military forces decimated. What was left of humanity's organized defense was scrambling, trying to regroup. But in the darkest hour, when it seemed like there was no hope, an unexpected ally appeared, Earth's scientists. Working in secret, a group of researchers, engineers, and military strategists gathered deep underground in hidden bunkers. They were determined not to let the planet fall without a fight. With the alien ships still hovering ominously in the skies, the world's leaders began to make their final preparations. If humanity was to survive, it would have to do so without relying on conventional warfare. The aliens had proven too powerful for that. Dr. Helena Blake, one of the world's leading scientists, was the first to make a breakthrough. Her team had been studying the alien technology since the initial attacks. We may not be able to fight them with our weapons, but we can outsmart them, she said, her voice low but determined. Helena and her team had discovered a weakness in the alien ships. It wasn't in their weapons or armor. It was in their communication system. While their ships were formidable, they were still relying on a centralized control system that could be hacked. This was humanity's chance, but they had to move fast. Helena and her team began designing a virus, a digital weapon that could infiltrate the alien network and bring their communication down. But this was no easy task. The aliens' technology was far more advanced than anything Earth had ever seen. Their systems were encrypted beyond anything imaginable, and the slightest mistake could lead to the total annihilation of any team attempting to infiltrate. Despite the overwhelming odds, the resistance movement began to grow. As the rest of the world cowered in fear, whispers of rebellion started to spread. Small groups of civilians, survivors who had lost their homes and families, began to form their own resistance cells. Armed with whatever weapons they could find, they struck back in the shadows, launching surprise attacks on alien supply lines and sabotaging their equipment. Though these attacks were small and often went unnoticed by the aliens, they were the first signs that humanity wasn't ready to give up. Among these rebels was Lieutenant Mark Rivers, a former soldier who had lost everything in the initial wave of attacks. His family, his home, and his comrades were all gone. But he was still alive, and he wasn't going to let the aliens win. Leading a small group of survivors, Mark had one goal: to buy time for the scientists working to disable the alien ships. Every day, his group fought with everything they had, using guerrilla tactics to strike where the aliens least expected it. But their numbers were small, and the aliens' response was swift and brutal. Mark knew they couldn't hold out much longer. The alien forces were too strong, and their patience was wearing thin. They had destroyed entire cities, and now they seemed to be focusing on wiping out humanity's last line of defense. Meanwhile, on the alien ships, things weren't as perfect as they appeared. Their leader, the Supreme Commander Thrax, had expected Earth to fall much quicker. The swift destruction of major cities should have broken humanity's spirit, but the aliens didn't account for one thing: the resilience of the human race. Thrax paced around the command center of the mothership, furious at the resistance. "They are nothing. Why are they still fighting?" he growled, his voice like a hiss. His officers stood in silence, afraid to speak. The human resistance was a nuisance, but a dangerous one. Thrax knew that if humanity could somehow unite and strike back, the battle for Earth would not be over so easily. Back on Earth, as the resistance grew bolder, the world's surviving leaders took a deep breath. They knew they had to make a choice: continue trying to fend off the invaders with limited resources, or place their faith in the scientists' plan. Dr. Helena Blake, after countless sleepless nights, finally had the answer. "We're ready. It's now or never." But even with the virus ready to launch, the task was far from simple. The alien motherships hovered high above, scanning the planet for any sign of a threat. To reach their communication system, the virus had to be uploaded directly into the alien network. A small group of brave souls would have to board a ship and get close enough to the mothership to upload it manually. Mark Rivers and his team volunteered for the mission. They knew it was a suicide mission. If they failed, the alien forces would crush what little resistance remained. But if they succeeded, they could turn the tide in humanity's favor. As they prepared for the most dangerous mission of their lives, Mark couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. The future of the planet rested on their shoulders, and failure wasn't an option. But deep down, he knew one thing: humanity had survived countless hardships throughout its history. And if there was one thing aliens hadn't accounted for, it was the unwavering spirit of the human race. The countdown had begun. The stage was set for the final push. Would humanity rise to the occasion and strike back? Or would this be the last stand of Earth? The days leading up to the mission were filled with a sense of unease. The few remaining human leaders had gathered in a makeshift command center deep beneath the ground, surrounded by flickering monitors and the hum of machines. The sound of footsteps echoed in the cold concrete halls as soldiers and civilians alike prepared for the most dangerous operation Earth had ever seen. Mark Rivers stood silently in the corner of the room, his thoughts a whirlwind. He couldn't shake the image of his fallen comrades, those who had fought valiantly and lost everything in the first wave of the invasion. Their sacrifices haunted him, but they also fueled his determination. This was more than just a mission. It was a chance for redemption. Humanity had been pushed to the brink of annihilation, but he believed they still had a fighting chance, and it was up to him and his team to ensure they didn't fail. Dr. Helena Blake, the lead scientist behind the plan, stood beside Mark, her eyes focused on the giant screen in front of them. It displayed an image of the alien mothership, looming high in the sky, its dark metallic surface gleaming ominously. The plan was simple, yet nearly impossible. Mark's team would infiltrate the mothership's defenses, upload the virus into their central communication network, and cripple the alien forces. If they succeeded, they would buy Earth time to regroup and fight back. If they failed, the planet would fall. Helena looked at Mark with a determined expression. "The virus is ready. We've managed to reverse engineer their communication system. All you need to do is get close enough to upload it manually. You'll have a window of 15 minutes before their defensive systems lock down. After that, the entire fleet will be on high alert. There's no room for error." Mark nodded, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He glanced at the faces of the other soldiers who would join him on the mission. Each one knew the stakes. None of them had any illusions about the danger they were about to face. They were going up against a force far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered, and their chances of survival were slim. But they didn't have a choice. The clock was ticking, and Earth had no more time to waste. The night of the mission arrived, and Mark's team gathered in the hangar, readying their equipment. The cold air was thick with tension. Each soldier checked their weapons one last time, ensuring their gear was secure. Mark walked among them, his mind focused but his heart heavy. This mission was personal for him. His comrades, his family, the world he had sworn to protect. They were all counting on him. He couldn't let them down. The stealth ships were ready, their sleek bodies designed for quiet, fast travel. The plan was to fly under the radar, avoiding alien detection as they made their way toward the mothership. Once they were close enough, they would infiltrate the alien ship's docking bay, disable its security systems, and upload the virus. The challenge was getting close enough to the mothership without being detected. The aliens had set up powerful defense systems to scan the skies, and if they were caught, the mission would be over before it even started. Mark climbed into the cockpit of his ship and strapped himself in. His team followed suit, the hum of engines coming to life. The hangar doors slowly opened, revealing the dark night sky. Mark's heart raced, but he pushed aside any fear. There was no turning back now. As the ships ascended into the air, they stayed low, using the cover of the atmosphere to shield them from the alien ship's radar. Mark could feel the tension building in the pit of his stomach. They were approaching the alien mothership, and the closer they got, the more vulnerable they became. The city lights below were just a faint glow now, the vast expanse of wilderness stretching out beneath them. The ship's systems were silent, as if they were invisible to the aliens. The first signs of hope. Then, the sky began to change. The darkness that had covered the world for weeks was now pierced by a faint blue light, a beam from one of the alien ships that began to sweep the area. Mark's stomach dropped. "We've been spotted," he muttered, his hand hovering over the controls. "Not yet," came a voice from his comms. It was his second-in-command, Sergeant Emily. "We're still undetected. Keep the altitude steady." Mark's grip tightened on the controls. He focused on keeping the ship steady, trying to maintain their cover. The ship's sensors began to beep softly, indicating they were approaching the alien mothership's outer perimeter. They were almost there, but the real danger was about to begin. The alien ships, their silhouettes now visible in the distance, began to move, their powerful engines roaring as they shifted into position. Mark's heart pounded in his chest. The time was almost up. One wrong move, and they would be torn apart in an instant. Then came the moment they had been preparing for, the command to break cover and move in. Mark's hand slammed onto the controls, and the ship lurched forward, speeding toward the docking bay of the mothership. The alien ships, realizing the presence of intruders, began to fire their weapons in their direction. The sky erupted into blinding flashes of light as the first shots from the enemy ships came close. "We need to hurry," Mark shouted into the comms. "We've got maybe a minute before they open fire for real." His ship flew low, skimming just beneath the alien ships as they began to fire. Mark dodged left and right, trying to avoid the alien ship's fire. His heart raced, but he couldn't afford to panic. They had come this far, and failure wasn't an option. Finally, the sleek shape of the mothership's docking bay loomed ahead. Mark piloted the ship in, locking onto the bay's magnetic field. The door slid open, and they were inside. As the ship's engines powered down, the team quickly disembarked, their feet hitting the cold metal of the mothership's interior. They had made it inside. Mark could feel the pulse of the ship's energy as he looked around, knowing they were now within the heart of enemy territory. The mission had only just begun. The moment Mark and his team stepped off the ship, a cold, mechanical silence enveloped them. The mothership's interior was an eerie blend of alien technology and incomprehensible design. Metallic walls stretched endlessly, their surface pulsating with a faint, eerie glow. Strange symbols, which none of the humans could decipher, adorned the walls, shifting with every moment like they were alive. The air felt thick and oppressive, and every footstep echoed ominously through the vast chamber. "Stay close," Mark ordered in a low whisper, his voice tight with tension. "This place is like a maze. We have no idea how deep their security is." The team nodded, the weight of their mission pressing heavily on their shoulders. They were here for one reason only: to upload the virus that would cripple the mothership's communication system and hopefully give Earth the chance to fight back. But they all knew how much was riding on their success. If they failed, the alien ships outside would immediately respond. If they were caught, there would be no second chance. As they moved deeper into the mothership, they encountered more bizarre alien features. The walls occasionally trembled as the ship's engines hummed, and the lighting seemed to shift, growing dimmer and brighter, almost like the ship itself was alive. Mark's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to stay focused. Their objective was ahead, and they couldn't afford distractions. Dr. Blake's voice crackled through the comms, breaking the silence. "You're getting close to the central hub. The virus is ready for upload. We've encrypted it, so no alien system can trace it. But you need to reach the main console and input the code manually. You'll have 15 minutes before the mothership's defenses activate." Mark nodded, his grip tightening on his weapon. The sound of his team's boots clicking on the metallic floor was the only noise as they made their way down the hallway. The layout of the ship was complex, but with the guidance from Dr. Blake, they managed to avoid detection, skirting past strange rooms filled with alien machinery and automated drones that patrolled the halls. As they approached the central hub, the tension became almost unbearable. Mark's breath was shallow, his thoughts racing as the countdown in his head began. They had to succeed. If they didn't, the alien forces would wipe out any remaining resistance on Earth. Then they reached the massive steel doors of the central control room. Mark motioned for the team to stop. His eyes narrowed as he inspected the door. "This is it. Get ready." The door to the control room was a heavy, armored barrier. It seemed to pulse with energy, almost as if it was alive. Mark approached cautiously, placing his hand on the cool surface. With a sharp motion, he drew out a small, high-tech device that would allow them to hack the door's security system. He inserted the device into a small slot near the door's edge. The soft hum of the device working was the only sound in the room. They stood motionless, waiting. Time was their enemy. Every passing second brought them closer to their doom. The device flickered, its screen blinking urgently as it worked to bypass the security protocols. Mark's heart raced, but he kept his composure. He couldn't afford to let fear get the best of him now. Then, with a soft hiss, the doors slid open. Inside, the central control room was unlike anything Mark had ever seen. Giant consoles filled with flashing lights and strange symbols stretched across the room. Massive holoscreens displayed thousands of data streams, most of which were completely incomprehensible to the human eye. At the center of the room stood a towering cylindrical column, its surface covered in alien writing. The column was the ship's nerve center, where all communication and control systems originated. "All right, we're in," Mark said softly, signaling his team to spread out. "Find the main console and get the virus into the system." The team moved quickly, their eyes scanning the room for anything that resembled a control panel. They had only minutes before the alien forces realized something was wrong. The tension in the air was palpable, and every second felt like an eternity. Mark moved toward the column, his eyes trained on the alien interface built into its surface. He had no idea how to operate it, but Dr. Blake's instructions had been clear. They had to input the virus manually into the central system before the aliens could stop them. As Mark reached the column, he glanced at his team. They were already working, trying to access the alien systems. One soldier, Private Jenna Wallace, had already managed to open a panel on the wall, revealing a series of glowing wires that pulsed with energy. She worked quickly, connecting her portable device to the system. "We're in," she shouted, her voice full of relief. "Uploading the virus now." The seconds seemed to stretch on endlessly as Mark waited. He stood guard, his eyes constantly scanning the room for any signs of movement. His mind raced, thinking about what would happen if they failed. If the aliens detected them now, it would be over. They were in the heart of enemy territory with no backup. And then, The unthinkable happened. A low rumble reverberated through the room, followed by a loud, high-pitched whine that filled the air. The lights flickered, and the screens began to flash red, signaling a breach in the security system. "They know we're here," Mark shouted, his voice sharp with panic. "Hurry up." Private Wallace's hands flew across her device, sweat dripping from her brow as she worked to finish the upload. "It's almost done. Just a few more seconds." Mark's heart raced as he watched the room's doors begin to close. The alien forces were trying to lock them in. They had to get out, and they had to get out now. The virus had almost finished uploading when the first shots were fired from outside the room. The alien forces were coming. Mark could hear their footsteps echoing down the hall. They had moments left before the entire ship went on high alert. "Done," Wallace shouted. In that instant, the room went dark. Mark's mind was a blur as he grabbed the team and ran toward the exit, their hearts racing with adrenaline. The battle was far from over, and they had just triggered the beginning of humanity's revenge. The seconds felt like hours as Mark and his team sprinted through the darkened corridors, their footsteps echoing in the vast, silent expanse of the alien mothership. Every corner they turned seemed to grow darker, the ship's lights flickering erratically, as if the entire vessel was waking up in response to the virus they had just unleashed. Mark's heart raced, but his focus remained sharp. They had completed their mission, but the real battle had just begun. Behind them, the ship seemed to come alive. The low hum of the engines shifted into a violent roar as emergency alarms blared throughout the vessel. Red warning lights painted everything in an eerie glow, and the ship's security systems were coming online in full force. Mark knew that the virus they had uploaded had triggered something far more dangerous than they could have anticipated. The aliens were not going to let them leave without a fight. "Move! Move!" Mark shouted, his voice hoarse as he pushed forward, trying to stay ahead of the growing chaos. The team was close behind, their weapons drawn, eyes scanning every dark corner, ready for any threat. Mark didn't dare look back. They had no time for hesitation. The ship's automated defenses were now in full alert mode. They had a limited window to escape. The first sign of the alien forces came as a shrill screech filled the hallway. The burst of light shot past Mark, narrowly missing him. A few feet ahead, one of the team members, Sergeant Ian, dropped to the ground, a bright red scorch mark burning through his uniform. Mark barely had time to register the hit before the first wave of enemy soldiers appeared, their sleek, armored forms emerging from the shadows like ghosts of death. "Get down," Mark shouted as he dove behind a large column of machinery. His team followed his lead, diving for cover as the aliens opened fire, their weapons crackling with energy. The walls shook as explosions rocked the ship, but the team's focus remained on survival. Mark peeked around the column, trying to get a sense of the situation. Alien soldiers in dark combat armor were swarming the hallways, their weapons firing in rapid bursts. They had the upper hand in numbers, but Mark's team had something far more dangerous: humanity's relentless determination. "Wallace, cover us," Mark barked. Private Wallace, who was carrying the team's portable heavy weapon, positioned herself behind a pillar and began firing back at the advancing aliens. Her weapon fired in a series of powerful blasts, sending aliens reeling backward, their bodies disintegrating into ash as the high-powered rounds made contact. The aliens' weapons were deadly, but Mark's team had better accuracy and coordination. They fought with a fury born from the need to survive. "We need to get to the escape pods now," Mark shouted, scanning the hallway for an exit. The deeper they went into the mothership, the more dangerous the situation became. If they didn't reach the ship's escape pod soon, they would be trapped. A loud metallic clang echoed down the hall. A massive armored alien war machine appeared, its hulking figure blocking the entire corridor. It was a walking tank, its weapons built to tear through anything in its path. The team froze for a moment, assessing the threat. This was a new level of danger, a challenge unlike anything they had faced before. Mark's mind raced. The war machine was heavily armored, but they could still take it down if they worked together. He exchanged a quick look with Sergeant Ian, who nodded. Without hesitation, Mark shouted, "Concentrated fire on the weak points. Aim for the joints." The team wasted no time. They fired in unison, their shots targeting the war machine's exposed areas. Sparks flew from its legs as they hit their mark, but the alien machine was not going down easily. It retaliated with a series of deafening cannon blasts, sending the team scattering for cover. Mark ducked behind a shattered wall, his heart pounding in his chest. The ship was becoming a war zone, and the odds of getting out alive seemed to be dwindling with every passing minute. They had to act fast. Wallace, never one to back down, repositioned herself and opened fire again, this time aiming for the war machine's central core. She let out a grunt as the weapon kicked back, sending a heavy blast straight into the heart of the war machine's power core. The explosion was deafening. The war machine's entire structure buckled under the force of the blast, and with a final agonizing screech, it collapsed, its massive body crumpling to the floor in a pile of smoldering debris. The hallway fell silent, save for the hum of the ship's engines and the team's ragged breaths. "We're not out of the woods yet," Mark said, his voice tight. "Keep moving." Without waiting for a response, Mark motioned for the team to press forward. They were close, too close to fail now. The escape pods were just ahead. But as they sprinted down the hallway, the ship shook violently, throwing them off balance. The alien forces were closing in, and Mark could hear the unmistakable sound of their weapons firing, growing louder with every passing second. "We're almost there," Private Jenna Wallace shouted, her voice full of determination as she kept firing her weapon at the oncoming enemies. Mark turned the corner, his eyes locked on the escape pod bay at the end of the hall. There was no turning back. The aliens were right behind them, but they had come too far to fail now. The escape pods were their only hope. With one last sprint, Mark and his team reached the doors to the escape pod bay. Mark slammed his hand onto the control panel, and the doors slid open with a hiss. The team rushed inside, but as Mark stepped into the pod, he couldn't shake the feeling that the war had only just begun. The battle for Earth was far from over, and they would have to fight with everything they had to survive. "Ready for launch," Private Wallace yelled as the pod doors sealed. The countdown began, and as the pod shot off into space, Mark's heart raced with anticipation. They had survived the first battle, but what awaited them on Earth was an even greater fight. The aliens had made a mistake. They had underestimated humanity, and now they would learn what it meant to provoke the wrath of Earth's last defenders. The real war was only just beginning. The escape pod blasted through the atmosphere at breakneck speed, tearing through the clouds and leaving Earth's surface behind. Inside the cramped, high-tech pod, Mark and his team were silent, the hum of the engines filling the otherwise tense space. They were safe for now, but the true weight of their situation had yet to sink in. What had started as a mission to sabotage an alien mothership was now a race for survival, with no clear path ahead. Mark stared at the small screen in front of him. The images from the ship's external cameras showed the aftermath of their escape. The alien mothership, a giant floating fortress of war, was now in flames, its remaining crew scrambling to salvage what they could. The impact of their virus had done its job, but it wasn't enough to bring the entire invasion to an end. There were still countless ships left in orbit, each one carrying the threat of Earth's destruction. "Mark," Sergeant Ian's voice cut through the silence. "What now?" "We've got a few hours to regroup. We're heading back to Earth, but there's no way we can take on the whole fleet by ourselves." Mark took a deep breath, his mind racing. The enormity of the task ahead seemed almost impossible. They had crippled the mothership, but Earth's defenders were far from prepared for the alien onslaught that would follow. The aliens didn't care about a single failed mission. They would send reinforcements, and Earth's military, despite its strength, was nowhere near ready for the full force of the invasion. "We need to warn Earth," Mark said, his voice steady despite the anxiety gnawing at his insides. "We need to prepare them. And we need more weapons. More firepower." Private Wallace nodded in agreement. "But they'll need to know we're still alive, right? Our message has to make it back before the aliens regroup and come after us." Mark turned to the control panel and pressed a few buttons. The pod systems were already sending out distress signals, but they weren't enough. Earth needed more, something that would shake them into action. "That's what we're going to do. We'll send them a message. A warning that will make them realize we're still in this fight," Mark said, his eyes narrowed with determination. "We can't just sit back and wait for the next attack. Earth will fight back, but only if they know we're still here. We'll strike first." The escape pod shifted, adjusting its course as Mark tapped in the coordinates for their transmission. They would need to hack into Earth's communication systems to send their message. It wasn't going to be easy. If the aliens had a way to track their signals, it could mean certain death. But it was their only shot. If they didn't act now, they might not get another chance. "Hold on," Mark said, tapping the final command into the pod's communication system. "We're sending them everything we know. The alien forces, their weaknesses, their numbers, everything." With a tense silence, the pod screens flickered, and the transmission began. Mark watched closely, his heart pounding in his chest. Time seemed to slow as the signal sent out across the cosmos, hoping it would reach Earth before the alien forces regained control. The transmission carried everything: the footage of the alien mothership burning, the virus they had unleashed, and the data they'd gathered on the enemy. The pod shook violently as it passed through the Earth's atmosphere, entering the final stretch of its journey. But even as the planet loomed large in the viewports, Mark knew the real fight was about to begin. The aliens had underestimated humanity once before, and they would do so again. But this time, there would be no mercy. The pod's engines began to slow as they neared Earth's surface. Mark glanced at his team, their faces grim but resolute. They had done everything they could. Now it was up to Earth's military to rise up and defend the planet. "Ready?" Mark asked, his voice calm yet firm. "As ready as we'll ever be," Ian replied, securing his gear and checking his weapon one last time. The rest of the team nodded in agreement. The escape pod's doors opened with a hiss, revealing the chaotic sky above Earth's atmosphere. Explosions lit up the horizon as alien ships engaged Earth's forces in a desperate battle. The world was on the brink, and Mark knew that this was just the beginning. But Earth would fight back. Humanity would fight back. Mark stepped out first, his boots hitting the ground with a firm thud. He raised his weapon, his team following in line. The battle had come to Earth, but they weren't going to let it end like this. From the distance, they could hear the rumble of alien forces closing in. The aliens had no idea what was waiting for them. The humans had been pushed to the brink of extinction, but they were far from done. "We fight for survival," Mark whispered, his voice low but filled with conviction. "We fight for Earth." The team moved swiftly, their eyes scanning for any sign of alien soldiers. As they advanced toward Earth's command center, Mark couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. They had survived against the odds, and now Earth had a chance to do the same. But as the sky rumbled above them, the real battle for humanity's future began. And this time, the aliens would learn that humanity's wrath was not something to be underestimated. The Earth's last stand had begun. The ground shook beneath their boots as Mark and his team moved swiftly through the chaos, dodging explosions and the debris of destroyed ships. The battle was now in full swing, and the fate of Earth hung in the balance. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about making the aliens regret ever setting foot on this planet. Mark scanned the horizon. Alien ships were dropping from the sky, their metallic hulls reflecting the fiery explosions in the distance. Humanity's forces were fighting tooth and nail, but they were outmatched. The alien technology was far superior. Still, the human spirit burned brighter than any alien weapon. "We have to hold the line," Mark yelled as he sprinted forward, his rifle raised. "If we can make it to the command center, we can turn the tide." His team followed close behind, weapons ready, adrenaline pumping. The sound of distant laser fire and the screech of alien war machines filled the air. But the humans weren't backing down. They had a secret weapon now, the alien mothership Spyrus, and it was time to unleash it. As they approached the command center, the sky above them suddenly went dark. Alien ships hovered, casting long shadows over the battlefield. From their vantage point, they could see the massive force closing in. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands, but this time, humanity wasn't outnumbered. Mark reached into his pack and pulled out a small device, a portable transmitter. It had taken hours to prepare, but now it was ready. This was their last chance. The virus, the one they had unleashed on the alien mothership, had spread through their communication systems, causing chaos and confusion within the enemy ranks. If they could transmit it to every alien ship still in orbit, it could cripple the entire fleet. "We only have one shot at this," Mark said, his voice tight with determination. "If we fail, there will be no tomorrow. Just tell us when." Sergeant Ian replied, his voice steady. The others nodded, their faces hard, knowing what was at stake. The alien forces were closing in, and the command center was only a few hundred meters away. But as they neared their objective, an alien scout ship swooped down from above. It unleashed a barrage of plasma fire, narrowly missing them. Mark's heart raced as he shouted for his team to take cover. "Get to the command center now," Mark ordered. "We can't let them stop us." With weapons raised, they rushed toward the entrance of the command center, taking down the few alien soldiers that were guarding it. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burnt metal. Explosions rang out behind them, but they pressed on. This was it, their last push. Mark reached the main console inside the command center, his fingers flying over the controls as he plugged in the device. The screen flickered, and the virus began to spread through the alien network. He could hear the faint sound of alien distress signals crackling in the background, but they were quickly drowned out by the hum of the device. "Transmission complete," Mark shouted. "It's done." But as he turned to face his team, a massive explosion rocked the building. The entire command center shook violently, and Mark was thrown to the ground. His vision blurred, but he managed to scramble to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. They weren't done yet. The aliens were still coming. Through the thick dust and smoke, Mark could see the silhouettes of alien soldiers marching toward them, weapons aimed at their group. But then, something strange began to happen. One by one, the alien soldiers froze, their weapons clattering to the ground. The virus had worked. The alien network was collapsing, and with it, the control the invaders had over their forces. The remaining ships in the sky began to fall, their systems malfunctioning and spiraling out of control. Earth's forces, now emboldened by this sudden shift, pushed forward with renewed strength. "We did it," Ian said, his voice full of disbelief as he looked up at the falling alien ships. "We actually did it." But Mark wasn't celebrating yet. They still had to fight. The battle wasn't over, but the aliens' advantage had been shattered. The invaders were now disorganized, confused, and vulnerable. It was humanity's moment to strike. Mark raised his rifle high. "Push forward. Let's finish this." Humanity surged forward, more determined than ever. The alien forces had underestimated them, but now the tables had turned. Earth's defenders were no longer just fighting to survive. They were fighting for victory. Each alien ship that fell from the sky marked another victory for humanity. The once unshakable alien fleet was now falling apart, piece by piece. The battle raged on, but the outcome was clear. Humanity had fought back the darkness, and now they were claiming their place in the galaxy. The invaders had learned the hard way that no matter how powerful they thought they were, they could never break the human spirit. As the final alien ships fell from the sky, Mark stood tall, watching the chaos below. The aliens had underestimated them, but now they knew. Earth would not be conquered. Humanity's wrath had torn through the invaders, and in the end, they would be the ones to pay. Mark turned to his team, a tired but triumphant smile crossing his face. "This is only the beginning," he said. "The universe will know that we're not just surviving, we're thriving." The war was over, for now, and humanity had won.